Good morning, Ed here for Crystal Clear Aquatics. It's been a productive week with a camera and I'm here on site on a pond that I have serviced and seen for many years. It's a lovely, lovely pond, but it's been crying out for some decent lighting. I think if you've got a nice water feature or a nice pond and you want to elevate it, lighting is essential. Now, I've used lots of these kits, as always, and I'm not affiliated with Oase, although I do know a lot of you guys there, so if you're watching, hello. But the Oase brand of lights is by far and away the best that I have ever used. Pond lighting, you can get some very cheap sort of solar lights and some very low wattage, shouldn't name brands really, but things like Oase used to make some very low power lighting. I would call those marker lights. They're not really going to illuminate a feature or a pond, but at night time you will see a little faint glow from that light. Instead, what you really want with pond lighting or water feature lighting is something that's going to illuminate a feature of the pond. Whether you've got a stream and you've got a cascade and you want to focus some light on the moving water aspect of that, backlighting that cascade of water. If you've got a water blade and you want to illuminate and uplight the stone wall or the face of the wall that the water's pouring over, or you want to have a nice LED strip light inside that blade, lighting will really, really make a dynamic aspect of the pond and make it into a truly fantastic visual treat. Now sadly I don't have the garden to myself. We've got people playing tennis behind me, so you might hear some shouts, and we've got the gardeners here cutting the grass as well, so apologies for the sound. Lighting being used, Oase lunaqua power LED light sets. They are one of the more expensive light sets on the market, but I also feel that they are, for me, one of the best and most flexible light sets on the market. Oase do cheaper light ranges, and that was something that we had considered for this pond, but because of the span of the pond, and I'll show you that in a minute, we've got a very large top header pool, a long stream flowing down behind me, and then a sump or feeder pool at the bottom. I wanted to be able to incorporate lights right the way across the feature, and most cheaper or budget light sets tend to have limited amount of light pre-wired from the light to a transformer, and the transformer itself is only weatherproof, not submersible. So that really restricts how far a span you can have from the lights to the transformer. This range of lighting is unique in that the transformer itself is submersible. So that means that I can conceal the transformer. It's actually going to get hidden underneath this bridge. That's my plan. So somewhere central, and then from there I can span and plug in lights right the way across the water feature. So let's open up the box. This is the lunaqua 3 Set 3 light set. So this is a complete kit out of the box that comes with 3 very nicely built and very bright LED spotlights, a submersible transformer, all the cable required, and some little ground spikes if you wish to mount the light on the side, or you've got somewhere in the pond that you can attach one of these. Obviously, in general, I don't tend to use the ground spike very much because these lights are normally installed in the pond and I'm not going to go spiking through the pond liner. There are some little mods that you can do with these that I've done frequently in other ponds. If you've seen some of my other videos, you might well have seen that, where I like to cut off this central bracket here, which is what the light hooks onto, and then I will then screw that somewhere underwater on the edge of the pond on a bit of stone so that you can hook the light on, pivot it, lock it into place, and it's not going anywhere. So this is the submersible transformer itself, and you see you've got 4 little ports here that currently are blanked off. And the idea is that each spotlight, you remove the cover, you remove the blanking screen, and you just screw in, plug and play that light, and the transformer itself plug into a nearby socket, a nearby power supply. I think they're a little bit stingy with the length of cable that you get on the transformer, particularly so as this is submersible. If you've got a deep pond and you want this in the bottom of the pond, you're really limited where you can position this and try and get that cable out of the pond to be able to do a join out of the water to extend this. So I do wish Oase would include a longer length of lead for this, but as yet it hasn't thwarted me, and I haven't had any instances where I've not been able to incorporate this into my designs and features. The beauty of having a submersed transformer like this means that everything is plug and play within the pond itself, and so you don't have to worry about having lots of leads from various individual lights coming out of the pond and trying to disguise them. It can all be concealed in the pond, and you've only got one cable coming out to the power supply. I think the other benefit of that is, as I've been doing this, one of the gardeners has come over to me to ask where I'm going to be routing the cables through the border. As I said, they're not going to be in the border, they're going to be in the stream, out of the way of any tools, out of the way of anybody that might potentially harm the cable when they're gardening. So again, I think that's a great design feature and something that needs to be considered when you're routing and laying cables. Now, the lights themselves come pre-wired with 5 meters of cable. So if I have a transformer in the middle, that means I can span 10 meters with 2 lights, and then I can position the others somewhere in between. This particular feature is a lot longer than that. I've probably got about 30 meters or so of distance. So Oase also do, very handily, an extension cable set. I believe they do a 5 meter, a 7.5 meter, and a 10 meter. I've picked up 2 of the longer 10 meters. And again, these are plug and play. You can plug in the end of the light into the socket of the extension lead and then run that off, and that will plug straight back into the transformer. A really quick and easy way of being able to extend that light. And that means then that I can run a huge distance between the lights and the transformer. Now these are very, very bright. They're just over 5 watts per LED, which is equivalent to about a 50 watt light bulb. So very, very bright. And if they're not positioned correctly, you're going to end up creating a lot of glare and a lot of blind if you're close to the pond. So again, you need to consider carefully where you're going to position these. They're handily on a nice little ratchet so that you can pivot the lamp and lock it into place. So you can get a nice position for this. And you're going to want to have a play around with the lights at night time to decide if you want to submerge the light, if you want to have the light partially raised so it's casting light just at the surface, or if you want to have it raised up above the water and floodlighting a large area. And I think a combination of the 3 different types of lighting look really effective. Something else that's very important to consider is how much plant life you've got in the pond and how clear the water is. If you've got a pond that's really green or very brown, submersible lighting isn't really going to create much of an effect. You're just going to have a very small pocket of light. So you want clear water if you really want to get the best benefit of submersible lighting. But equally, you want a large body of water that isn't too cluttered with planting. Now this is a well-established pond and stream. There's a lot of plants in here. And I suspect that I'm going to end up positioning these lights very close to the water's surface or even slightly above, so I can cast light over the surface rather than illuminate underneath, because I think we're going to end up losing a lot of that light as it's absorbed and sort of scattered by the plants. Right, let me show you the pond and the stream that this is going on. So this is the lowest section of the feature, of the sump, and the final fall. Some lovely established borders around it. A nice length of stream running up here. A little bridge that crosses over. Hello. Another section of stream. And then it terminates here in this top pond. Looking beautifully clear. I was here doing a service a few weeks ago and there was quite a lot of blanket weed. The treatments have worked wonders. And there's nothing left at all. Lots of lovely plant life in this pond and a huge abundance of wildlife. So the installation plan is going to be, there's a power supply down at the bottom pond with an existing conduit that the pump cable is running through. So I'm going to tap into that and I'll run my extension flex through that conduit into the bottom pond. Something's happened on the tennis court. And then I'll get the cable up into the stream and I'll run it underneath a piece of pond liner in the stream to the transformer, and then from that I'll be able to plug the lights in and conceal the cables for each individual light in amongst the stream and the gravel. Right, I spent a long time chatting, I better start doing some work. So to get the cable through the conduit, and it's always very important to make sure that you do run cables through protective layers of conduit if it's going to be anywhere in the ground. I'm not so concerned in the pond itself, but certainly here, buried in the border, having a conduit means 1, it's protected, and 2, in the future, if you need to run extra cables through, like in this instance, or replace something, it's a much easier job of being able to pull a cable through, attach a string to it, and then pull the new cable back through it. Here, I'm using what's called a fish tape, or a very flexible piece of wire that I can push through the conduit tape on the new cable and then pull it back through. It's a bit of a faff when you're on your own doing it, unless it's a very, very straight run of pipe work. Sometimes having another pair of hands to help you feed the cable as somebody else is pulling can make it a bit easier, but I'm on my own, so I've got to make do with 2 hands, not 4. Thankfully, the conduit is actually split into 2 pieces, and that's going to make it a little bit easier for me as 2 short runs rather than 1 long run. Gorgeous day again today, lovely and sunny, and like yesterday that was very miserable and drizzly as I was finishing off the video for that job. And there we go, I'm out. So I'm just drying off the wire so I can get good contact between the sticky tape I'm using and the cable. I don't want this to come loose and the cable to pull free when I'm halfway through the conduit. So make sure you get a nice secure fix. I'm sure every electrician out there is probably balking at the fact that I'm using a pair of scissors here, but use the tools that work for you, and this works for me. Rather than tape the cable directly onto the fish tape as it is now, I like to splice into it and remove some of that outer rubber sheath, because I want to try and minimise increasing the width of this when this is stuck to the tape, the fish tape, and then I've taped it over. That's going to be a considerably larger package than the cable width itself. So if I can minimise that by only taping the cores in the centre, that means that the whole thing is a little bit slimmer and it will make it a lot easier to pull it through the conduit. Now when you remove that outer protective layer of sheath and you get to the inner cores, there's a powder, a residue which you're going to want to wipe off again so you can get some good contact between whatever sticky tape you're using and the wire fish tape. And now when I tape those 3 strands together, the overall width of that is about the same as the original cable, so it's going to be nice and easy to pull that through. I'm just using some insulating tape, some electrical tape. It's really sticky, it works very well for this application. And don't scrimp on this bit. Although the other end, it's a bit of a pain having to then remove all of the tape. I really want to ensure that I'm only doing this once. Perfect, I've got my wire taped onto the cable. I'm going to now start to pull that through. And this is where that other pair of hands comes in handy. There we go, all the way through. So this end, once I've done all of the connections, the other side will be ready to wire into this switch box. Now, currently, this is a traditional kind of manual push button switch box, and I'm going to wire it into this for now because what I had ordered hasn't arrived in time, so I'm going to have to come back and fit something else. But we're going to be upgrading this unit to a box which has got timer functions. I think with lighting, it's very important if you can to either have some form of remote control feature or some sort of timer function, particularly if your pond is quite far away from the house, but if you get a view of the pond from the house, because even when it's wet and miserable in winter, it's quite nice to be able to see your pond illuminated. And the last thing you want to do is to come outside, get wet, push a button, and then have to come out and turn it off again. So having a timer function or a remote control makes sense with lighting. And this unit's going to be replaced with a very nice unit which has got manual push buttons as well as a smart feature so that you can independently set timer functions for each individual switch. I seem to have made a couple of friends. Is this what you're after? Go on then. It's a simple life being a dog, isn't it? Well done. Much better behaved than my dog. But, go on then, one more. Well done. Last one, I've got work to do. So I've got my cable up to the bridge, but of course, if I can help it, I don't want to do any cable connections underwater. Even though this is an IP68 rating fitting, which is designed to be waterproof, I would certainly not be confident about having it submersed for any length of time. Equally, if I can help it, I don't want it outside the pond either, because there's going to be a length of cable that's going to then be in contact potentially in the border with the gardeners. And no one's going to remember where this is. So what I'm going to do is securely fix the join underneath the bridge, clear of the water, and I'll mount it on a little bracket that comes with the fitting. Look at you guys. Honestly, you can't see it. I've got these two dogs here. Go away. So I'm going to mount that securely underneath the bridge. I'll remember where it is. It's out of the water and it's out of the way of the gardeners. So I'm using a good quality stainless steel screw, and I can just very simply mount a cable connection bracket to the underside of the bridge. There we go. And that means I can securely keep that connection above the water level, but out of the way. So the cable join is all wired up, and I can now get that secured to the bracket. There we go, beautiful. Out of the way, above water. So once I've wired up that end, the transformer is now going to be live and it's ready for me to start plug and playing with those lamps. Right, that's the power supply connection done. Now, if you're not a competent DIYer or confident with electrics, don't mess around with this sort of thing. Get a qualified electrician in or somebody who knows what they're doing. I've ensured I've been able to isolate and turn off power before taking the cover off this box, and then to be absolutely safe, I've got a little electrical tester just to make sure that it's not live before I start playing around with this. Inside these sort of units is very simple. Each one of these switches is independently wired and fused, just like a regular 3-pin plug. You can hear the water flowing in the background. That's just because it's still travelling back to the bottom pond via gravity. It is still switched off. I'll get the cover back on this, and then I can start messing around with the transformer. So I'm just attaching the lights now to the transformer, which is a very simple job. Now, the two lights that are going at the absolute extremes, either end, both have to be extended. And that's why I've picked up these two extension cables. So I'll wire that onto the light first, and then I can wire that to the transformer. It's lovely working here in the quiet, just hearing that sound of the splash behind the camera. Very peaceful. Right, so this end is going to get plugged into the transformer. Got to be careful here for the sake of the camera. If I start getting too happy wiring these things up, I'm going to have cables running over the bridge. Let's bring them all underneath. So each connection has got a really nice thick rubber seal.
Now it's at this point that my microphone really annoyingly runs out of battery. So I'm going to have to do a voiceover and just ad-lib. And it's going to sound a little bit like some weird dodgy Chinese martial arts movie that's running on subtitles.
Do not fight with strength, absorb it, and it flows. Use it.
So what I'm trying to explain here is the male socket attached to the light plugs directly into the transformer, and it's this nice thick rubber seal which mates against another seal on the transformer, and when those two lovely big stainless steel screws are fitted and torqued down nice and tight, that creates a watertight seal against the electrics that are submersed in the pond. Now it's really important when you remove these little blanking covers that you keep hold of them. In the future, if ever you remove one of the lights or one of the lights is faulty, you'll need to then replace one of those blanking cover plates to fully waterproof the transformer. So keep them somewhere safe. So I'm now using the Oase lunaqua power LED specific extension lead set here to extend the light. And just like the transformer, you've got a blanking plate with two screws that needs to be undone. And then you can mate together the plug from the light directly into that, and then the other end of the extension lead you'll plug into the transformer. And hey presto, let there be light. Now the Oase lunaqua power LED light set I'm using here is a set 3, so that's 3 lights with the transformer and the cable. To be able to utilise all 4 spaces on the transformer, you then need to purchase separately an individual spotlight called an Oase Lunaqua Power LED W. No idea what the W stands for, but it's a solo light, and you can then add that onto the transformer to make it 4 lights. So that's all 4 lights connected. They work. Now on with the proper sound.
Right, that's all the lights fitted, all the cables concealed, and I've positioned them kind of loosely in an area that I think will look best. I've got one up there which is sort of going to be illuminating the central fountain. I'd like one here which is going to illuminate the surface of this bit of the stream, and likewise I've worked my way down. The lights themselves pivot on a little bracket. You can secure them to that ground stake, and you can also attach them to a piece of block paving or a brick, just to keep them nice and secure. In this instance, because we're not exactly sure where they're going to go, I've made sure that I've left a little bit of slack cable so they can be moved around. And for the time being, they're just going to lay concealed discreetly in one position. And then when I come back later on one evening, have a look at the lights at night time. If I'm happy with the position, I'll put a few rocks around it so it won't move, and we'll just keep them fixed like this. I'll do my signing off now because there's no point in doing it at night time. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Ed from Crystal Clear Aquatics, and I'll see you in the next pond. Right, it's 9:30 in the evening. I'm back on site. It's not quite as dark as I'd like it to be, but at least I'll get a general idea of what the lights are doing, where they need to be angled. Seem to be making a bit of a habit of turning up at customers' houses late at night these days. Right, let's go and have a look. Right, the GoPro camera is notoriously useless at night time, so you're probably not going to get the same effect I am. But I think that looks pretty cool. I can see the stream all the way down to the bottom. So it's very difficult to try and position these lights so that they're in a good position from every angle. So I've tried to position it so that this side of the pond, the house side, and the side where you're going to be sitting and entertained in the evening, looks its best. If you go down to the bottom and look back the other way, you're going to start to get blinded by the lights. Right, I don't know if you can see me in the dark. It's gone 10 o'clock. I'm done. I'm very pleased with this. It looks lovely. Thanks very much. Good night.